Hey, what is going on, all of you podcast listeners? Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Missionary Podcast, and one that if you have clicked on it right now, you might have a salsa level that is at like factor 10. You might be feeling frustrated, angry, aghast, shocked, bewildered, or bothered by the fact that your evangelical pastor actually put out there a true believer votes for Biden. If you clicked on this because you saw that title and you were bothered, boom, clickbait, baby, got you, all right? Yes, I chose that title on purpose to get you to click, hopefully with some frustration, or maybe on the flip, maybe you're like, finally, an evangelical is saying what I've been saying. This is so great. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. Well, here's the deal. It's all clickbait, baby. We're going to talk about that statement, but we're going to talk about a lot more because here at the Everyday Missionary, our mission is clear. We want to kind of push away all of the extra debris. We want to not get baited into all the debates that can happen in society. And we want to get back to, all right, what does authentic Christianity look like in the 21st century? And what does it look like to be an everyday missionary in complicated circumstances where many things in life aren't clear-cut, many things in life aren't easy, and many things in life demand nuance, right? That's what we're trying to do. And in this particular season of the podcast, we're using our political climate and the cultural issues of the day as a working framework to then try to work through how does the Bible and theology apply to the current context. And part of the reason I'm doing that, and man, to be honest with you, I can't wait to get past the election simply to get back to more traditional topics. But part of the reason I'm doing that is because we live in a society that is preaching all the time, and we are listening to preachers literally every day. And what I mean by preachers is not necessarily Bible preachers, but people that are preaching to our minds and to our emotions in such a way that they're wanting to elicit faith or fear. They're wanting to elicit anger or empathy. And much of the political season is all about that, right? It's designed to try to get us to react, to get us to put our faith in a place or fear in a place. And I want to kind of weave through some of that and get us to not think in terms of reacting to the voices, but rather to authentically trusting the Spirit and caring more about what Christ cares about than the things the world tells us we need to care about. And I think in these political times, this is where this is very heightened, right? More than ever, there's just going to be ads over the next couple of weeks. And certainly if you listen to MSNBC or you listen to Fox News or you listen to CNN or whatever your outlet is, maybe it's online media, whatever it is, there's going to be this message that says, if the other side wins, you're doomed. Like you're absolutely doomed. Your children will die. The earth will burn. The economy will crash. You will have zero freedoms. You will live under a dictator or you will live under socialism. Like they will let you know in no uncertain terms that there's never been a time more critical to the survival of the human race and the lasting legacy of the United States than this election. And if you decide wrong, you have eliminated and obliterated the human race. No pressure, right? So we should know by now that's a lot of hyperbole. That's a lot of overstatement. That's a lot of fear-mongering, but we get pulled in to the fear-mongering. And when we get pulled into the fear-mongering, we sometimes start to lose sight of what it means to be distinctly Christian, to bring Jesus to bear on the environment that we live in. We just get pulled into those debates, those discussions, those phobias that are getting promoted, and then we get very passionate about that. Because again, if the human race is at stake here, it demands my umbrage and my anger and my strong words, and I've got to make a strong stand and say hard things. And you know what? If I break some eggs, that's what you got to do to make an omelet. So if I break some friendships and I break some hearts and maybe I don't really show my witness as good as I should, but it almost doesn't matter because don't they understand lives are at stake in this next thing and that's all that matters? And you can feel the thing, right? And so with that, people will make statements that go too far. And in the statements that go too far, we don't even realize how we are moving then from the orthodoxy of politics to the orthodoxy of faith, and how in the midst of that, we may be corrupting the very essence of our doctrines of faith. In fact, corrupting the essence of the gospel itself, literally corrupting the essence of the gospel itself with statements that get made for political motivations and reasons. And then from that, pretty soon, we have just interlocked Jesus and politics in a way that we don't foresee. So, for example, go back to my opening statement. True believers vote for Joe Biden. That, my friends, is a legalistic statement. And we should recognize it as that. Now, maybe some of you didn't see it as legalistic. You saw it as immoral. Well, there's part of the problem right there, right? You just saw it as an immoral statement. I'm going to get to that one in a minute, right? But here's where it's a theological problem. To say that all true believers vote for Joe Biden is to say, here is the way we know if you're authentically a spirit-sealed, truly changed, gospel-rescued person. You believe in Jesus. Oh, and by the way, for the longest period of time, we didn't know there was a secondary thing until the 20th century, until the 21st century, in fact, where we then realized that, hey, there's this election in 2020, and finally we have this other way of telling whether you're a true believer, which is you vote for Joe Biden. If you believe in Jesus and vote for Joe Biden, we know you're a true believer. Now, everybody listening is like, yeah, that's insane. And a vote for Joe Biden, I would be afraid that you're not a true believer if you vote for Joe Biden, right? That's what you're probably thinking, which I go, that's part of the problem right there. Let me get there in a second. Let me take this statement in a different direction. I have not seen anybody that said in the evangelical world, which again, this is an evangelical podcast, not a Catholic podcast, not a liberal podcast, not a Republican podcast, not a Jehovah's Witness podcast. This is an evangelical podcast. I've not seen anybody say true believers vote for Joe Biden, right? I haven't seen it. And so I'm probably the first one saying it, and it's just offensive to people. But here's what's interesting. I've seen many people say true believers vote for Donald Trump. And that is still legalism, right? So my mission is not about the politics. I keep saying I have no problem if a believer votes for Joe Biden. I have no problem if a believer votes for Donald Trump. I have no problem if a believer votes for Jesus and just writes in Jesus, or libertarian, or Green Party, or write in your candidate, or don't vote at all, right? Like you're making a statement like, I can't buy in, so I'm not going to vote, right? Don't sign up and you don't have to play. Like I have no problem with that. It's the statements that are always going to concern me. And so what I have seen from people is saying true believers vote for Donald Trump. And that's a legalism again. That's a legalism because what it's saying is we are going to use an earthly mechanism to discern whether we think you're a true Christian, right? Matter of fact, this even kind of goes in a little bit to the idea of the voting for the lesser of two evils. And what happens in that is we go, we're going to vote for the lesser of two evils. And in the evangelical world, what that has always meant, as long as I can remember, is we vote for the Republican candidate because they're certainly less evil than the Democrat candidate. And there's two problems with this. First of all, it's still we're associating ourselves with evil. We're just saying, I'm going to go with the lesser of evils, which is sort of problematic to me. But the other is it decides that I am the arbitrator of true evil in the world, and I have decided that A is less evil than B, and therefore, if you vote for B, the more evil in my mind, you too must be evil. You can't discern differences of evil, and then this comes back to it becomes this arbitrator of who's truly a believer and who's not a believer. Now, here's part of the problem I have with this. When we look at all of the information and data, when it comes to Protestant, more conservative in their ethics Christians in the United States, there is a substantial divide between who votes for the R and who votes for the D. White evangelicals, white Protestants vote typically for the R, but African American vote for the D. These are people that go to Baptist churches on both sides. These are people that love Jesus on both sides. These are people that love the Bible on both sides. These are people that actually affirm the core tenets of the Christian faith on both sides, but they vote very different. And the problem then for us is if we start saying, well, this is the lesser and this is the more evil, and true believers vote this way and they don't vote that way, then again, we're making this statement that says we have decided over all the things in the world that could discern the difference between true and fake belief, we're letting politics be that. So now suddenly politics has kind of risen to the level of godhood status in some ways, and we've made it this additive to the gospel. If you're truly a Christian, you do X. And this is problematic. And this was problematic in the first century when the Jews were trying to step in and add extra stuff to the gospel. And Paul's like, you got to stop. We're saved solely by Christ. It is not by the works of the law, which, by the way, when we're discerning greater and lesser evils and who's a better and worse candidate and who true believers would vote for and not vote for, we're usually using the law to arbitrate those decisions, right? And then Paul says, but you missed it because you're not saved by the law. You're not saved by doing it or failing to do it. You are saved by the finished work of Christ. He goes to the cross. He takes your sin. He gives you his righteousness. He dies the sinner's death, buried 3 days, rises on the third day to validate everything he said is true. And we therefore have nothing to boast in, nothing to point to. It's not how I vote or don't vote, do or don't do, think or don't think, act or don't act. It's all the work of Christ. There's my rant for the day. It's all of Christ. If we want to be Catholic, great, let's play that game. We can start to add in all kinds of new things that make that the arbitrating decision on who's truly a believer. But let's not start using who you vote for as the deciding factor. Let's not. It doesn't come down to who you vote for. Now, what I do agree with is that there's going to be some things that help you make your decision to vote. I do think God cares about those things, right? What your motivations are. But once you get into that, as you're looking at scripture and you're wanting to be an everyday missionary and you're trying to discern the most gospel-centric, most kingdom-oriented way to cast your ballot, well, different people are going to look at the realities of our problems in different ways. And I've said that before on the podcast. Some people are going to say, you know what, the life of the unborn is going to matter the most to me. Others are going to say, no, it's the life of the born that matters most to me. And so they're going to think those who can give health care and those who can help the poor and those who have more programs to help those who are in need, they're going to go that way. That is a noble thing as much as it's noble to say, I care about the unborn. I care about those issues and those policies. I want to see transformation. So I'm going to go that way. As soon as we say, well, but my cares are more important than your cares. My cares are more noble than your cares. Well, the problem is the Bible says both of those things matter and we must care, but we're thrown into this kind of A or B decision. And so you can't get everything you want by just going to A or just going to B. So you have to split some decisions. And that split of decision is painful and hard and should be thoughtful and should be caring. And if it's a decision where you're trying to give yourself away more than you're trying to get something for yourself, that's kingdom oriented. And if you're doing that the best you can, and you're doing that from the heart of saying, I want to be most like Jesus and bring change to the world in a healthy way. And so you cast a vote for A or you cast a vote for B. Again, in all of that, if the heart is just, I want to honor Christ, that's what matters. That is showing your heart of belief, not where your vote actually went in the end and who got your vote. That is not the arbitrator of belief. A heart that wants to bring the kingdom to bear on the world is evidence of the Spirit in the person, and that's what counts. And so my rant for today, I don't know, I might make this a rantathon 3. I'm not sure. But my rant for the day is let's not let our politics make us legalists, right? Where you go in your politics literally does not matter. Why you go there, that can matter a little bit more. The fact that you're going to use your politics as a filter to decide if somebody else is truly saved, that's legalism and that's a problem. That's evil and that is wicked. That is wrong in every single sense of the word. Just read Galatians. It is a wicked, wicked thing, and we don't want to give into that. So the idea that says, here's how I know somebody's a true believer, how they cast their ballot, right? That's no different than the Jew saying, here's how I know somebody's a true believer. They don't eat pork. Here's how I know somebody's a true believer. They get circumcised. Here's how I know somebody's a true believer, right? They obey the rules of the Pharisees, right? That's legalism. And as much as we sometimes want to say, well, you know, all of this licentiousness in our culture is just so representative of what Satan's trying to do to blind the minds of people, I go, yeah, so is legalism. Like, it's so easy for us to think like being kind of chill on ethical things is a dangerous thing. But legalism killed Jesus. Legalism sought to destroy the church. Legalism is literally a doctrine of demons, it says in 1 Timothy chapter 4. And so for us, in our modern climate, we need to think more Christian and less Democrat and less Republican, less liberal and less conservative. We need to think like Jesus. We want to act like, think like, talk like, conduct ourselves like Jesus. And we want to assess the world around us based on those things as well. And so my clickbait thing is obnoxious. True believers vote for Joe Biden. But here's what's equally obnoxious. True believers vote for Donald Trump. Those are both obnoxious from a Christian point of view. It's a dangerous thing to start thinking in those ways. Now, again, I understand that those things come from passion. They come from conviction, whatever else. But this is where we need to curb our drives a little bit. And we need to think more theologically and less politically. That's how simple it is, right? And I don't pretend that that's easy, right? At all. Like, I think it's very hard to try to pull out all of the tentacles that are kind of in our brain and soul when it comes to things that we're dealing with. But how we should think and vote as followers of Jesus comes just to that. We need to think and vote like Jesus. I firmly believe that we are supposed to be in the political process because things that we care about is kind of in part displayed through how we vote. But there's a lot of things to care about. And again, no party has the stronghold on all of those things. It just doesn't, right? If we care about the next generation, we care about them being educated, we care about them being healthy, we care about them having exposure to good things, we care about how they conduct themselves with their bodies and their sexuality and all these different things. No one party has anchored the exclusive rights to being able to do that well. Both will fail. And so true believers can vote all sorts of ways. And it doesn't mean that if a believer goes away different than you in this, that you should look at them and be like, they got to grow still, because that's the temptation. Okay, they're a true believer, but they're not mature, right? It doesn't work that way. It just shouldn't work that way, right? Because I have voted many different ways over the course of the last 20 years, many different ways. And I would like to think that every time I do, it's because I have kind of this North Star compass in my mind. And it may be different than yours. And I believe yours has the best of intentions. If it's not selfish, again, this is the one thing I will say about the overarching thing in my mind when it comes to my politics. I don't want it to be about preserving what I want. It's not about me. If I'm bringing a gospel context, it's about giving myself away. It's about how do we, again, raise the tide so that all ships rise, because I think that's blessing of the nations. This is not about self-preservation. I never vote from self-preservation. I do vote from, how can this better other people? How can this kind of reach the least of these, the weakest of these, the broken, the disenfranchised, those who don't experience the same kind of justice that I do? I mean, I'll look at all of those contexts and ways. It's why I did the podcast last week on being pro-life, not simply anti-abortion, but pro-life. I care about the unborn. I care about the mother. I care about the unborn once they're born. I care about that unborn kid all the way to when they become an adult. Like, all of that needs investment. I wish one party took ownership of that whole package. They don't. I'm in a tough spot trying to figure out how to discern that. And so then I got to use a lot of just guidance of the Spirit and trying to understand what's the best thing. So in the end, I think this is a rant-a-thon at this point. In the end, doesn't matter, again, how you vote. Matters why you vote. Are you voting with a Spirit-minded heart? Are you voting with a kingdom-minded context? And then in that, we don't want to fall into the legalism that says a more authentic, more thoughtful, more understanding, more Spirit-led person will always go this direction. Our Black brothers and sisters, they go to the D almost every time. And there are really good reasons that they do. Like, if you go back and you look at the history of it, there are really good reasons that they do. And then there are white evangelical believing brothers, and they vote oftentimes toward the R, and there are good biblical reasons that they do. Now, in the middle of that, there can be some really bad ideas in there too, for both sides, right? And so this gets back to authentic believers or discerned as believers, not by how they vote, not by who they cast a ballot for, but by Jesus. Like, by Jesus. Like, this is a no-brainer, right? This needs to continue to be the no-brainer. So as much as you might find true believers vote for Biden is offensive, I hope you find that true believers vote for Donald Trump is equally offensive from a theological perspective. Neither one of those are offensive in their vote. Like, a person votes for Biden, a person votes for Trump. That's not offensive. And nor should we judge one another for that, right? There is no room for judgment here. If you're going to vote for Biden and you judge the Trump voter, you're wrong. If you're going to vote for Trump and you judge the Biden voter, you're wrong. You don't know their motive and their heart. We're all put in a very tough spot. And then one that gets judged the most is the one that just writes in Jesus. I did this back in 2012. I wrote in Jesus. I posted that on social media. I got plowed for it, as though I was the most sinful person of all because I was throwing my vote away. I mean, that's another legalism. Another legalism is, oh, don't throw your vote away. What are you talking about? Any way you vote or don't vote at all, it's not throwing your vote away if your conscience is what binds you to your decision. If you're a total pragmatist, I guess that's throwing a vote away. But if you're a person that says, you know what, I have some conscience in how I vote. So I vote Jesus, I vote independent, I vote third party, I vote libertarian, I don't vote at all to make the point of you're not getting my vote this time. Whatever it is, if the conscience is bound by that and you feel like I'm doing this to honor God, you're doing the right thing. There is no better, worse in this whole deal. I think the better and worse is if we vote out of anger. I think if we vote out of selfishness. I think if we vote to punish somebody, those are unhealthy traits in the Christian. And the Bible speaks to that, right? Those are in the unhealthy things. You want to suppress or oppress other people, and that drives your vote. That is a problematic sin heart. But again, it's not even so much in the vote itself, it's in the heart that generates that. And so we must continue to try to think theologically and not get baited into the divide, into the polarity, and into the things that, frankly, will simply divide the church. I played a thing on my Facebook feed this week of the fact that more important is that we stand as one, as the church. What's more important is that we stand as one under the gospel. And what's most important is we protect the sanctity of the gospel and we don't let it fall victim to the tyranny of politics. And we don't use the tyranny of politics to become an additive to the gospel. That is a dangerous and destructive thing. You want to talk about our country coming undone at the seams? Well, from a Christian perspective, it's if legalism infiltrates. It's if kind of this licentious thing infiltrates. Both are dangerous. And so this is where we want to be thoughtful. We want to be caring. We want to be Christ-led. And the more we do that and we protect the essence of the gospel, a gospel that's endured for 2,000 years in every political climate imaginable and stays strong. You ready? Stays strong when we don't inject the politics in and falls apart and turns into another religious just pile of steaming dew. It's when we inject our politics into the gospel. That's what corrupts it. That's what destroys it. That's what really harms and hurts the church and affects the next generation. So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this because again, you see the injections coming and they've come before, and every time it hurts the advancement of the gospel, it hurts revival, it hurts mission. We don't want to do that. So stand against the tide. Vote your conscience. Vote how you want to vote, but do not let your politics become the standard of true belief and hold others to it. Otherwise, you know what? It's no longer about Jesus. It's not about Jesus. It's just about politics. Now, we can be everyday political pundits, but what's more important is that we learn to be everyday missionaries.